Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The safe was older than the house and heavier than a bad dream. It sat low in the back of my closet behind winter coats that still smelled faintly of cedar. I set my palm on the cool metal, breathed once to steady the tremor in my fingers, and spun the dial. Not the old flourish Harold used to tease me about, just a careful sweep to the numbers I'd known since 1989. The handle resisted, then gave. Hinges sighed. Inside, a square of darkness waited where velvet should have glimmered. No blue cloth pouch, no narrow gray box, no soft leather envelope. Gone every one of the little vaults that held a piece of our life. The sapphire brooch Harold found in a dusty Lakewood antique shop the summer Ethan left for college. The ruby earrings that flashed like stoplights the night we danced at the Officers Club. The slim Art Deco watch I wore to our daughter Jenna's first piano recital when my hands wouldn't stop sweating. Even the silly charm bracelet with the tiny skillet because Harold said I could make fried chicken a preacher would lie for. All of it. Air where gold once was. My breath stalled in the middle of my chest, a stubborn bird refusing to fly. I touched the felt shelf as if the pieces might be hiding in the grain. Nothing. My knees didn't buckle and I didn't fall. I was not that kind of woman, but the world narrowed to the rectangle of empty safe and the soft static in my ears. Looking for something, Mabel Sloane's voice came from the doorway, creased with amusement like she'd found a sitcom on in the middle of the afternoon. I turned. She was framed by the hall light, one hand braced against the door jamb, mouth tipped into that smile that never made it to her eyes. Her hair was pulled high, perfect, as if gravity worked differently for her. "My jewelry," I said. My voice sounded even. It surprised me. "Oh, that." She stepped fully into the closet, fingers skating the coats like a window shopper. "We went through those things last week. Remember, it's just, they weren't being used. Ethan and I decided to donate them. Church thrift store downtown. Someone else will actually appreciate them." "Donate," I repeated, tasting the word the way you might taste milk that's gone sour. "It's about decluttering, Mabel. Lightening the load. The house will breathe better. You will too." She patted my arm, soft and condescending as a lullaby. "And honestly, jewelry isn't practical for you anymore. You don't really go anywhere." I could hear the furnace hum behind the walls, steady as a metronome. I looked at the empty shelf, then at her. "You're right," I said, and I watched the small triumph flicker across her face like a porch light snapping on. "I don't need them anymore." She smiled wider. "Exactly. But you," I said, and the words came with the weight of steel sliding home, "are going to need a lawyer." It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Something slipped behind her eyes. Color thinned. For a heartbeat, she was a child caught with a hand in the till. "Excuse me." She laughed, a short, nervous thing that landed wrong in the small room. "That's dramatic." I reached into the safe, lifted the empty shelf with both hands, and set it aside. Dust made a pale crescent on my fingers. "Step out of my closet, Sloane." She did, but not before she glanced back at the safe as if it might restock itself like a refrigerator. In the bedroom, light from Lake Erie pushed across the rug, winter bright and thin. I closed the safe, turned the dial, and wiped my fingerprints from the chrome with the cuff of my sweater. A habit Harold had teased me about long before laminates and alarms replaced common sense. He used to sit on the edge of the bed on Saturdays, when a storm rolled up the lake, his legal pad propped on his knee, while he drafted letters in a blocky hand. "Never sign what you haven't read," May he'd tell me. "And never let a stranger manage your checkbook just because they smile when they say please." He died in that punishing February cold when the furnace fought and lost, and we ate soup over the sink because the dishes were too cold to touch. 2 weeks after the funeral, the house fell silent in a way that wasn't peace. People came with covered dishes and left with paper plates, and my phone didn't ring after 9. Ethan started showing up with grocery bags and a worried brow. His wife followed, first with flowers and a casserole, then with throw pillows, then with paint chips, then with opinions that grew legs and learned to run. It came softly at first. "These drapes make the room gloomy," Sloane said one Sunday while football murmured from the den. "Natural light is so good for you." I said yes, because sunlight felt like kindness, and because the drapes were older than Jenna's patience. Next came the hallway runner trip hazard, then the china, "no one uses gravy boats anymore," then my Tuesday book club roads, "get bad after dark," Mabel, then my habit of making coffee at 6, the grinder's loud, and Ethan works so hard. She would tilt her head and call me sweetheart when she said it the way nurses do on television. I started pouring these beans into the grinder with both hands cupped, hoping to muffle the sound. I tucked my church bulletin inside the sports section of the plain dealer like a teenager hiding a comic book. I told Linda from Book Circle that I had a touch of the flu and then told her the same the next week, and then I stopped picking up when she called because the message light blinking on the machine felt like someone knocking on a locked door. Money lived on the kitchen counter in a stoneware mug with cardinals painted on it. I dropped my debit card there every evening so I wouldn't leave it in a coat pocket like I'd done once in December. One morning the mug held a stick of gum and a grocery receipt. "I grabbed your card for the week," Sloan said, warm as bathwater. "I'll handle bills and groceries together. One system, you know." She kissed my cheek like we were family. Harold had put the deed in my name years ago, a practical thing that embarrassed me because it felt like wearing a crown. "You're the better steward," he'd said, signing with a flourish. "I just draft the rules." I kept the folder marked house at the bottom of the filing cabinet, hard to reach, so I wouldn't keep taking it out to look when I couldn't sleep. Now in the glass of the closet door, I could see Sloan hovering by the bedroom threshold, working her jaw like she had a piece of gristle in a back tooth. "There's no need to be cruel," she said finally. "It's just stuff." "Not to you," I said. "To you it's cash." Her mouth opened and closed. "You're confused." I walked past her toward the hall. At the top of the stairs, the banister gleamed where Ethan had sanded it last summer. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and yesterday's onions. Downstairs, the coffee maker sat quiet on the counter, its cord looped neatly like a leash. I filled the kettle instead. Stainless steel rang against the sink. The sound was clean. From the kitchen window, Lake Erie was a gray sheet tugged tight to the horizon. People think water is soft. People haven't stood on the shore in an east wind in March. Behind me, Sloane's voice floated down the hall lighter again, trying to find its balance. "You don't have to make threats, Mabel. We're on the same team." I set 2 cups on this counter because my hands like order. One for tea, one to dry. On the corkboard by the phone, a faded business card sat under a thumbtack, Clifford Hayes, attorney at law. It had lived there so long the pin had rusted a circle into the card, and the phone number had lost one of its digits when Jenna peeled tape from a birthday banner last year. I slipped the card from under the tack and tucked it into the pocket of my cardigan. The kettle murmured. Upstairs, a door closed with more force than it needed. I kept my back straight. In the safe, the shelf waited to be put back, a right angle of felt and wood. I would do that later. For now, I poured water over the tea bag and watched the steam rise like breath on a cold morning patient, invisible proof that heat still moved through the bones of this house. The tea went cold before I took the second sip. I slid Clifford Hayes' card from my pocket, read the number twice, and dialed from the landline because it still felt steadier than a cell. He picked up on the second ring, the way working lawyers do. "Hayes." "Clifford, it's Mabel Carter." A paper shuffled on his end. "May, you okay?" "No," I said, and the words sat clean between us. "Can you see me today?" 3 o'clock, bring whatever you have." I hung up and washed the cup because hands like mine need a small task. When I turned, Sloan stood at the edge of the kitchen like a houseplant that had learned to walk. "You're dressed," she said, surprised and faintly offended at the same time. "I have an appointment." "With who?" "Podiatrist," I said, and reached for my cardigan. Ingrown nail. She winced. "Do you want me to drive?" "No, thank you." On the way out, I took the file labeled House from the bottom drawer and tucked it under my coat. I didn't hurry. I had learned long ago that rushing makes you look guilty even when you aren't. Downtown February light sharpened the steel and glass until the buildings looked like they'd been cut out of ice. Clifford's office sat on a high floor with windows that watched the lake. He came out to get me himself, sleeves rolled to the forearms, tie loosened like it had been a day already. He hugged me once quick. "Sit, May." I sat and put the file on his desk. The leather smelled like furniture polish and old paper. Clifford took a legal pad and a pen that clicked with authority. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. Not with every bruise of feeling those were for the quiet of my own kitchen, but with dates and textures and names, the missing jewelry, the donation, the drapes, the runner, the "you don't need to make coffee at 6, the red mug on the counter where my debit card used to sleep, the way Ethan's shoulders sloped when Sloan spoke for both of them. I finished and watched his jaw go still. "This is elder financial abuse," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "It's a crime in this state. It's also the kind of thing that hides well because families try to keep it in the house." "I want it out of my house," I said. "Okay." He made 3 small boxes on the pad and wrote beside them. "We need records, we need proof of your capacity, and we need pictures of anything that's already been liquidated." He glanced up. "Do you understand what I mean by capacity?" "I do." He nodded. "You still have your own accounts?" "I have one. She's been using the card." "You'll go to the bank this afternoon," he said. "Open a new account in your name only. Transfer what's left. If she asks, you say the bank lost your card and you're waiting on a replacement." He tapped the second box. "I'm sending you to Dr. Klein for a cognition screen. She's gentle and thorough, and she writes like a judge. You'll pass it in your sleep, but we'll have paper if anyone tries to paint you foggy." He tapped the third box. "I'll put an investigator on the jewelry." West Side, first 3 pawn shops there move high-end pieces without good questions. We won't talk about this on the phone again. If you need me, come in person or hand me a note. He slid the legal pad away as if the decisions he'd made were ordinary. What do I do at home, I asked. Nothing loud, he said. You act normal. You let her talk. And if your phone has a voice memo app, you use it like a tool. The bank was warm and smelled of carpet. The branch manager wore a gray blazer and a face that tried to read people kindly. New account, she said. We can absolutely do that. I signed where she turned the papers. I didn't shake. When she asked if anyone else needed to be authorized on the account, I said no and smiled, as if we had agreed on oatmeal instead of eggs. Before I left, I printed statements from the checking I'd been using. The numbers told a quiet story: cash withdrawals on Fridays always between 10 hours and noon. Grocery stores too far from our zip code. A boutique in Tremont where nothing costs less than a bill with a president's face carved like a mountain. At home, Sloane sat in the breakfast nook with a laptop open and 3 candles burning like she was summoning summer. How was the foot? Attached, I said, hanging my coat. I slid the bank envelope into the pocket of the apron I used to peel apples and set the house file on top of the fridge, where we keep picnic blankets and the good thermos. It felt safe up there among things that only get touched on purpose. My phone had a red icon labeled Voice Memos. I opened it and played with a test recording while standing by the sink. The mic picked up the ring of spoons, the whisper of the heat vent. I thought about where to leave it, where it would hear everything and not be seen. The spice shelf under the cabinet sat at the angle where gossip and kitchen work meet. I set the phone behind paprika and cumin pressed record and went to the porch to break down a box. Sloane took a call. Hey, she said, voice bright. Yes, I talked to him about the power of attorney thing. No, he's soft. It's fine. He hates conflict. No, his mother's fine. She doesn't track, you know. It's sweet, but yeah. A drawer opened. Cutlery knocked. Once we move her into something with supervision, it'll be easier to keep the house moving forward. Ethan is so ready for a modern space. I pulled packing tape slowly so it wouldn't scream. Comps say 720 easy, she said. If we stage? White walls plants nothing personal. I have a cousin near Parma who knows a good facility. It's not sad, it's fine. She'll have people her age to play cards with. Her laugh turned light, effortless. I know, but this is how families do it when they care. The call ended. The kitchen moved again, the sound of a fridge seal letting go, the sigh of it closing. I waited 2 minutes, then came in with the flattened box and the smile I keep for photographs I don't want to be in. Your foot okay? She asked, almost tender. I'll live. That night, after she'd gone to the den to watch a show where people argue over houses with too many windows, I took the phone from behind the spices and hit stop. I named the file Kitchen 001 because names make you brave. In the span of a week, I collected small hard things bank statements that showed money thinning like hair, a crisp letter on Dr. Inez Klein's stationery stating that I was fully oriented to person, place, time, and situation with memory and executive function intact for age. The business card of a private investigator Clifford favored left face down on his desk like a playing card you can't reveal yet. I changed the code on the safe and the lock on the back door. I filled the red mug with pens. On Saturday night, Ethan hovered in the doorway while I worked a crossword. Sloane's planning brunch tomorrow, he said, voice neutral. Mother's Day. She wants it to be nice. I like nice, I said, and penciled in Erie for lake with a short name. Sunday came in rich and green. Sloane woke early, energetic the way people are when they intend to be seen. She laid out a table on the deck with a runner the color of a new tennis ball and put tulips into mason jars like television told her to. She wore a pale dress that looked like it had been ironed by a patient person. Her friends arrived in a neat row of SUVs, shoulders wide, laughter louder than it needed to be. I poured coffee and handed plates like a volunteer at a church fish fry. At 10:30, Sloane found me by the sink. Do you mind resting upstairs for a bit? She asked, soft. Too much motion makes Ethan's head spin, and this is Mother's Day. I wiped my hands. I am one. She laughed. Oh, Mabel, of course. Just give us an hour. I went as far as the back bedroom walled in by windows and stopped at the top of the stairs. The house carries sound like a body carries a song. I left my phone on record behind the spices and left the bedroom door open. I sat on the floor where the landing meets the hallway and watched dust float in the slant of late morning sun. Voices rose and fell. Scrape of chairs, forks striking plates. At some point, a friend asked a question in a voice she thought was quiet. So, when do you two move? Sloane's reply floated up, sweet and matter-of-fact. When the paperwork is clean. Once Ethan has POA, it's signatures. And well, she won't be here. There's a place in Parma Heights that has a garden. Another voice curious, won't she fight you? She's not really tracking anymore, Sloane said. And Ethan's done pretending the museum is a home. The house is worth $720 if we go neutral and list before July. Ethan said something I couldn't hear. Someone laughed and said dream kitchen money. I stared at the banister Ethan refinished last summer. The shine caught in the grain he'd opened with sandpaper and patience. My fingers found the groove where Harold's ring had knocked a dent the day he lugged the old television up the stairs alone because he refused to wait for help. When the party thinned, I went back to the kitchen to start the soak. I lifted the spice shelf with both hands as if I were straightening a frame. The phone's red bar told me it had been listening the whole time. I set it flat on the counter and saved the file as Mother's Day 01, then rinsed a stack of plates one by one until the water cooled and my back ached like honest work. The tulips on the deck leaned toward the lake, all color and no scent. In the window glass, my face looked like my mother's, older and steadier than people guessed. By afternoon, the deck was empty and the runner lay in a curl like a line that had lost its purpose. Ethan came in alone and set his palms on the counter the way he did when he was a boy and needed to tell me he'd dented the car. "You okay, Ma?" "I'm fine," I said and handed him a towel. We dried in silence, passing plates back and forth. He didn't look at me and I didn't look at him. The old choreography of two people who share a kitchen and too much history. When the dishes were done, I climbed the back stairs and slipped the phone into the pocket of the sweater I'd worn downtown. The card from Clifford lived there, too warm from my body heat. The ink softened at the edges. The house breathed. The lake wind pressed its cool palm against the windows and held it there steady as a vow. By late afternoon, the house had cooled into that blue hour when everything looks truer than it is. I set 4 plates on the oak table like I had for birthdays and snow days and ordinary Tuesdays. Jenna's flight landed first. She came in with her coat unbuttoned and her eyes already wet. Marcus arrived 30 minutes later, a duffel slung over one shoulder, jaw tight, the way it was when he was 12 and swore off lying forever. Lily drove in at dusk from Raleigh wheels, ticking on the driveway like a metronome. They didn't ask questions. I didn't offer a speech. We cooked. Chicken and dumplings can quiet a room. Jenna chopped celery like it had misbehaved. Marcus rolled dough with the old pin that belonged to my mother. Palms set wide like a boxer squaring up. Lily salted the stock and tasted with the quick, efficient spoon of a nurse. The kitchen filled with steam that smelled like memory. Ethan hovered confused by the choreography of siblings who didn't need instructions. Sloane watched from the threshold, smile thinner than thread. "Company," she said. "How spontaneous." "Family," I said and slid a pan into the oven. Ruth arrived just before 7 with a canvas tote and a kiss for my cheek. My sister will tell you she doesn't keep score, but she owns 4 kinds of paper and 2 kinds of ink. She set her notary journal and a stamp the size of a biscuit on the sideboard. "I brought cornbread," she said, and then softer. "You okay?" "I'm present," I said. It was enough. We ate like people eat when they're pretending nothing needs saying. Forks lifted, broth cooled, chairs scraped. Sloane kept up a pleasant patter about a co-worker's baby shower and a new bar class in Lakewood. Ethan nodded and refilled water glasses a boy at a school dance, working too hard to be seen as responsible. When we were done, I stacked plates and let the hot water run until the steam softened the lights. "In the den?" Ruth asked. "In the kitchen," I said, and Jenna heard what I didn't say. She wiped the table with a dishcloth and set a placemat in the center like a stage. Marcus took the head chair and rotated it to face the table's long side, an old trick from debate team days. No one at the head, no illusion of throne. Lily closed the swinging door to the hall just enough to make the room our own. Sloane stayed standing, arms folded loosely, eyes clicking from object to object as if cataloging what might be used against her. "Is there a plan?" she asked, friendly. "Yes," I said, and took the card from Clifford out of my sweater pocket as if I were retrieving a handkerchief. "We're going to listen." I set my phone on the mat. I didn't look at Ethan because love makes people take sides too early. I opened the voice memos and tapped play on the file, labeled Mother's Day 01. The room filled with the thready, clean sound of our kitchen captured without knowing it would be a witness, ice clinking in a glass, a fork against a plate. Sloane's laugh tugging the string of attention. "When the paperwork is clean," her recorded voice said, light as a kite. "Once Ethan has POA, it's signatures. And well, she won't be here. There's a place in Parma Heights that has a garden." The recording carried a friend's hum. "Won't she fight you?" "She's not really tracking anymore," Sloane said on the little speaker. "And Ethan's done pretending the museum is a home. The house is worth $720 if we go neutral and list before July." I paused it. The only sound in the room was the attentive hush of people who have just been given the shape of a thing they were afraid to name. Ethan swallowed. "Sloane, it's out of context," she said quickly. "You know how group talk gets. It's spitballing." "Play the rest," Marcus said, not looking at her. I played the clip of the kitchen call from earlier in the week. Sloane's voice bent into confidence for someone who wasn't in our house to smell the soup. He's soft. It's fine. He hates conflict. Once we move her into something with supervision, it'll be easier to keep the house moving forward. Sloane let out a small breath and tried to smile on Ethan. You know how I am when I'm nervous. Jokes. I didn't mean. Ruth opened her tote and set a folder on the table. May, you want me to lay this out? Yes. She slid 3 things onto the placemat, like cards in a slow game. First, the letter on Dr. Klein's letterhead fully oriented. Executive function intact. No cognitive impairment noted. Next, a printout of bank statements I'd pulled at the branch. Withdrawals lined up on Fridays like a chore nobody asked me to do. Third, a sheet of 8x10 color photographs from a man named Daryl with a camera and a way of buying pizza for security guards, the sapphire brooch sitting in a glass case under too bright light. The Art Deco watch on a velvet prop with a little hand-lettered tag that read, Vintage $250. A grainy date stamped still from an exterior camera showing Sloane walking into River and Rose Pond with a small gray box at 10:18 a.m. Sloane's mouth opened. She looked at Ethan the way people look at exits during a fire. That could be anyone, she said, and then smaller. That brooch looks like 100 brooches. The watch, Lily said, gently tapping the photo with a fingertip. Serial number on the clasp. It matches Mom's appraisal. How did you? Ethan's voice was all cotton. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Jenna lifted her chin. You took her things. I donated, Sloane said, strained, clinging to the word like driftwood. To a pawn case. Marcus's tone made the air colder. It was a loan. Sloane snapped, heat finding her. Short term, for the house, for improvements we talked about, for our life. Our life, Ethan repeated, hollow around the edges. Ruth turned another page in the folder and set down a typed document with empty lines and careful margins. Here's what's going to happen, she said, in the tidy cadence of someone who has stamped 1,000 pages. We have a repayment agreement that itemizes the funds withdrawn, $76,400, with a schedule you and Clifford can settle like civilized people. We have an acknowledgement that you have no ownership interest or tenancy beyond a date certain. We have a no-contact provision that keeps everyone from making trouble for the sake of drama. Sloane blinked at her. Who is Clifford? An attorney, I said. You brought a lawyer into our home. Sloane's voice lifted and then pitched lower when she remembered it never plays well when women raise their voices. Mabel, that's vindictive. What's vindictive, Jenna said, too calm, is calling our mother confused to her friends and planning where to put her like a piece of furniture. Sloane looked at Ethan again, asking for the script she'd always been able to hand him. He didn't pick it up. His face had the colorless cast of a man who has just realized he's been present at a crime he didn't intend to sponsor. Sloane, he said, quiet. Did you take the jewelry? She tried once more to find the tear that would fix the scene. It didn't come. It was for us, she said. Everything I've done is for us. Ethan's shoulders lowered a fraction like a bridge relieving weight. No, he said. It was for you. Ruth clicked her pen. The sound carried like a gavel in a small-town courtroom. We can notarize tonight, she said, or we can drive to Clifford's office in the morning and notarize there. I'm flexible, the terms are not. Sloane stared at the papers as if there might be a draft that read kinder when the light shifted. You can't just kick me out. You live here at my invitation, I said. You don't have a lease and you don't own this house. You are not being kicked. You are being asked to sign an agreement that acknowledges the truth. What if I don't? Then we call the police, Marcus said. He didn't raise his voice either. He didn't have to. And we file a report. And we ask the prosecutor in this county if they're in the mood to make an example. Elder financial exploitation reads well on paper. People remember it. Silence met him and then shifted to make room for the small sounds of an evening, the hum of the refrigerator, the timer on the stove ticking down to 0 and never beeping because someone had turned the volume down for peace. Sloane's eyes filled and cleared. She picked up the repayment agreement and read it in a way that suggested she'd read contracts before. 60 days, she said, thin. The schedule is negotiable, Ruth allowed within reason. The move-out date is not. Sloane turned to Ethan like a coin seeking a slot. You're okay with this? He looked at his hands. I'm ashamed, he said. I can't be okay with anything until I figure out how I didn't see what was in front of me. For a long minute, none of us spoke. Sloane pressed her lips together, then took the pen Ruth offered. She signed the repayment agreement with a firm hand and the acknowledgement of no interest in the property with a shakier one. Ruth turned the notary journal and had her sign there, too neat on the line, then pressed the stamp into its pad and onto the page. The seal appeared crisp and circular, a little sun. Move out in 10 days, Ruth said, sliding the documents toward me. Key surrendered on that date, no re-entry without permission. Sloane set the pen down and smoothed the corner of the mat as if she could iron the room flat. Are you happy? She asked, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at a place just over my shoulder, where the person she meant to be had stood earlier and then walked away when the evidence sat down. No, I said, but I'm done. She stood chair legs, catching the rug and then letting go. "I'll pack," she said, thin as paper. Ethan didn't stop her. He didn't follow. He put both hands on the table, fingers spread like a man measuring a piece of wood before he cuts it. Lily reached for his wrist, brief and human. He let her hold it for a second, then pulled in a breath and let it out like he was learning again how the rhythm of that worked. I gathered the photographs and the letter and the bank statements into a single square pile. Ruth capped her pen and tucked the stamp away as if it were a sleeping animal that needed dark to be calm. Jenna started on the dishes because she can't sit with clean pain. Marcus took the trash to the bin like it weighed less than it did. Upstairs drawers opened and closed quick and graceless. A suitcase zipper ran from one life to another. I stood at the sink and turned the water on until it ran hot again, and then hotter steam ribboning from the surface. In the window, the yard lay dim and reflective, the porch light catching the railing in a curve of gold. I reached without looking and reset the spice shelf, nudging paprika back beside cumin cinnamon against cloves, each in its place labeled and ready for use. The morning after the signing, the house felt unfamiliar in the best way. Quiet, but not the kind that presses on your chest. I wiped the table with slow circles and set the phone in the drawer with the bottle opener and the good shears. Ethan came down in last night's t-shirt and stood by the sink as if the room were new construction and he didn't want to scuff it. "You sleep?" I asked. "A little." He washed his hands longer than necessary. "I'll change the locks today." "We have a spare set in the top drawer," I said. He nodded, grateful for the instruction, grateful for anything that sounded like a task. By noon, he had the back door knob off the brass plate, balanced on an old Cleveland Browns towel. The screwdriver slipped once and left a crescent in the paint that he smoothed with a thumb. The sound of the new bolt seating home was small and right. He moved to the side door, then the garage. I labeled the new keys with blue painter's tape and a ballpoint, my handwriting steadier than it had been in months. Clifford came by in the afternoon with a manila envelope. "We served her with a demand letter for personal property," he said. "If she has anything else of yours, she'll either return it or pretend she never saw it." "What about the jewelry?" I asked. "Working on it," he said, and left a copy of the letter on the counter under a magnet shaped like a cow. 2 days later, the doorbell rang at 10. A courier in a wool cap handed me a small brown box that had been overtaped by an anxious person. The return address was a P.O. box on the west side. I set the box on the table and cut through the tape with the paring knife I use for peaches. Inside newspaper crumpled around smaller bundles. I unwrapped them one by one, the sapphire brooch cold and quick in the light. The Art Deco watch still on its velvet prop. The silly charm bracelet with the skillet, the tiny handle bent as if it had been thinking. At the bottom, a pawn ticket torn in half. No note. Ethan stood behind me with his hands on the back of a chair, like he needed furniture to keep him upright. "You want me to?" "No," I said, and lifted the brooch. The pin still worked. It caught the fabric of my cardigan with a sure click. For a moment, the kitchen was the officers' club again, a wax dance floor and a band that refused to play too fast. I put the pieces in a ceramic bowl and carried them to the bedroom. The safe took the new code like a promise kept. I laid each item on the felt and closed the door without staring into the dark the way people do when they want the past to explain itself. On Friday, Ethan called work and said he'd be late. "I have to go downtown," he told whoever answered. He didn't say why, and I didn't ask. A man can say something once, then say it to the person he needs to say it to. That afternoon, Linda let me back into book circle like I just stepped out for the mail and gotten distracted. "You're in your seat," she said, and everyone laughed, because the chair's just a chair, and also not. We were reading a thin novel about a woman who sells a piano and buys a bicycle. I said what I thought about the ending, and nobody interrupted. Afterward, Linda walked me to my car, the way people do when Cleveland insists on being wine cold in April. "You look like yourself," she said. "I feel like a room with the windows open," I said. A week later, Ethan took a day off for domestic relations. The courthouse air had the dry chill of buildings that prefer paper to people. We sat on a bench under a map with counties drawn like puzzle pieces. He wore a jacket he'd ironed himself. Sloan arrived with a lawyer in Navy and a folder fat enough to look important. She didn't look at us. She looked at a spot over the clerk's shoulder and kept her face in whatever shape she had practiced in the bathroom mirror. The hearing was brief. No marital home to divide. No shared accounts with anything left in them. No children. The magistrate's questions came in a flat tone that made everything sound routine. When it was done, papers were signed and stamped and slid back with the finality of a lid. Ethan thanked the clerk and held the door for 3 strangers on the way out, as if the hinge were part of the test. We stopped for coffee in a lobby that smelled like bleach and burnt beans. He warmed his hands on the paper cup and stared at a spill on the tile. "I thought I was better than I turned out to be," he said. "You are better than you were," I said. He nodded once and drank. That evening, Clifford called. "You're going to get a call from an attorney named Herrera. She represents Sloan." "What does she want?" "Money she doesn't have," he said, "or a way to pretend she paid it." The next day, Ms. Herrera rang at 3. Her voice was low and professional. Ms. Carter, my client, would like to propose an in-kind transfer to settle the outstanding amount. She recently inherited a 1/2 interest in a duplex in Toledo. Current valuation suggests her share is approximately $82,500. She's prepared to quitclaim that interest to you in full satisfaction of your claim. Why not sell it and pay cash? Because she can sign a deed today, Ms. Herrera said not unkindly. A buyer takes longer. Clifford drove me to the office on Euclid Avenue, a glass box with art that looked like someone had placed geometry under stress. Sloane sat at the end of the conference table with her lawyer. She had lost weight in the last 10 days. The collar of her blouse didn't fit the same. She glanced up when we came in and then down at her hands. Herrera slid a folder across the table. The documents were neat, ready, a quitclaim deed from Sloane to me for all right title and interest in the property at a Southside Toledo address I didn't recognize, a copy of a recent appraisal, a proposed mutual non-contact agreement 5 years, and at Clifford's quiet request an affidavit of acknowledgement in which Sloane would state plainly what she had done and that she was signing without duress, inducement, or confusion. Herrera didn't flinch at the affidavit. She turned to her client. "You can sign that," she said. It wasn't a question. "We'll need title insurance," Clifford said, issued after recordation. "Seller pays premium." Herrera nodded. "We'll cover it." Sloane looked up finally and directed the words to the center of the table. "I don't have 8 years to drag a debt like a sled," she said. "This cleans it." "It records it," Clifford said. Ruth met us there because she was already downtown for a closing. She took a chair at the far end and laid out her stamp like she was setting a place. The signing was not dramatic. People signed, people initialed, was stamped. The deed slid back across the table with a new weight. Sloane signed the affidavit last. Her hand shook once near the bottom and then steadied. She pushed it toward Ruth without looking at anyone. Herrera handed her a tissue and then capped her pen with the soft click of things ending. Outside, a delivery truck downshifted and the sound climbed the glass like a ladder. Clifford gathered the copies and gave me a small nod that meant we'd done what could be done in a way that would stand up if someone tried to kick it. We drove home in a steady line of traffic that made the city feel held together by cars and the small patience of strangers. Ethan was on the porch when we pulled up the porch light on, though it was not yet dark. "How did it go?" he asked. "Paper," I said, and handed him the envelope with the stamped deed. He read the top page as if it were in a language he hadn't used since school and could remember by moving slowly. He looked at the address and smiled without meaning to. Toledo. Half a duplex. Half a start, I said. That weekend we repainted the front door. The old color had been a tired red that bled into the wood like sorrow. We chose a blue the paint store called Lake Morning and used 2 coats with enough drying time between them to make the job honest. When we were done, the house looked like it stood up straighter. Ethan stepped back to admire his lines. "You could hang a level on that," he said. I put the grinder back on the counter and set it to 7 a.m. The noise didn't feel like an argument anymore. I filled the red Cardinal mug with pens that all worked and moved the bank envelope to the file cabinet, where it fit in the folder marked Accounts, like it had been waiting for a home. On Sunday at church, a woman in a pew behind me squeezed my shoulder in that quick way that says, "I don't need the story to know the weather you came through." After the service, the pastor asked about Harold's old fishing rod for the rummage sale, and I said I'd look in the garage, and he said to take my time because memory is worse than dust. In the parking lot, the wind off the lake lifted the hair at the back of my neck and smelled like cold metal and clean water. That afternoon, I called the title company number Herrera had given us and confirmed that recording had gone through. The clerk sounded cheerful. Clerks tend to when something is finished. "You'll receive the owner's policy in the mail," she said. 2 to 3 weeks. I set the phone in its cradle and went to the bedroom. The safe opened under my hand with the ease of something used properly. I didn't take out the brooch or the watch or the bracelet. I only looked at the small square of felt where they rested and then closed the door and turned the dial. The house made evening sounds, a soft sigh from the ductwork, the dim tick of the kitchen clock. Ethan hammered a small nail in the hall to straighten a frame, and when he missed, he swore softly like a decent man trying not to. Before dinner, I taped the new key to a card with our address on it and wrote spare at the top. I put it in the drawer with the batteries and the twine. The porch light clicked on as the day slid toward dark, a round coin of yellow laid down on the rail. I stood there for a minute and watched it do its simple job. Spring crept back the way it always does in Cleveland, shy at first, then sudden as a door blown open. On the morning I turned 69, the lake lay a paler blue than the door we'd painted, and sunlight came into the kitchen with nothing in its hands. I ground beans at 7 because the sound belonged to me again. The red Cardinal mug held 3 pens that all worked. Ethan had written cake on the grocery list in his blocky print and crossed it out, then written bake. He was in the backyard now with a mixing bowl and an apron over a flannel reading the recipe like it might confess if he stared long enough. I watched him through the window while the kettle murmured. When the timer dinged, he didn't flinch. He set the layers to cool on the porch rail like someone airing quilts. By noon, the house had visitors. Jenna carried a vase taller than her forearm and a bouquet that leaned joyfully in every direction. Marcus arrived with a paper bag of lemons for zest, and the same stubborn jaw he'd had at 12 softened at the edges. Lily parked on the street and came up the walk with a stack of thrift store plates she'd found because the pattern looked like Grandma's wallpaper. Ruth let herself in with a wrap on the frame holding a small wrapped box and a stamp tucked into her purse the way old habits carry their tools. We ate outside plates balanced on our knees, the porch a raft that had decided to stay. The new blue on the door looked like it had always been there. Ethan's cake leaned but held. When he sliced it, the knife went clean. When he served me a piece, his hands didn't shake. The breeze off the lake lifted the napkins and the edge of the tablecloth and smelled like newly washed snow. After lunch, Linda and 2 women from Book Circle came by with a plant in a cheerful pot. Hard to kill, Linda promised, tapping the soil. We sat in the yard and talked about chapters and weather and how the city crews never timed the hydrants right. Every so often my eyes went to the kitchen window out of older habit. No one minded, no one sighed. The house kept its own breath. Later, while the others cleared plates and argued over the right amount of lemon in frosting, Ethan and I drove to Toledo. He wanted to check the duplex before the week got long. I wanted to see the place with my own eyes instead of just the square footage on paper. The drive was flat and honest fields, not yet green signs for fireworks and feed. On the south side, the street lined itself with porches and small trees that try hard. The duplex stood solid and tired. A gutter had loosened its grip. The paint on the trim peeled in thumbnail shapes. A boy rode past on a bike with a card flicking the spokes. Ethan unlocked the front and we stepped into a room that smelled faintly of dust and laundry soap. Half of it ours now, a fact that sat steady. He walked it like a carpenter windows outlets the way the floor met the baseboards. In the kitchen, a chipped mug lived alone in a cabinet, abandoned kindness. I washed it and left it on the counter to dry. Ethan ran a hand along the banister. "I can fix most of this," he said, not bragging. "You will," I said. On the way back, we didn't say much. Some roads are better with silence. When we reached Cleveland, the sky had slipped into that long light that makes even alleys look thoughtful. The porch light clicked on before we turned into the drive, a small coin of yellow laid down on the rail. I've always liked a light that knows its job. Inside the kitchen was clean and lemon sweet. On the table sat a stack of envelopes with my name written by different hands. One from Lily held a photograph of Harold in his uniform, younger than Ethan, is now laughing at something off camera. I traced the air near his mouth but didn't touch the paper. In the bedroom, the safe opened under my hand with the ease of something used properly. The brooch, the watch, the silly bracelet lay where I'd left them, weighty. In the quiet way true things are. I didn't pin the brooch or wind the watch. I closed the door and turned the dial and listened to the click that sounds like a period. Back on the porch, dusk gathered without hurry. The neighbor's dog barked once and then thought better of it. Across the street, a kid dribbled a ball until someone called him in by name. Ethan brought 2 mugs and sat beside me. The cake leaned on the counter behind us, missing its proud slice. He rubbed a thumb over a paint fleck on his forearm, and then, as if remembering, let it be. "I met someone," he said, eyes on the rail. "Her name's Andrea, teaches 3rd grade. I told her I'm rebuilding. She said, 'Good, bring a level.'" He grinned, surprised at himself. "Sounds like she gives good directions," I said. "She does." He took a breath. "I'm not rushing." "You're not." The porch light drew a small circle on the steps. Moths tested it and spun away. Down the block, a screen door clapped. Lily's plates clicked back into the cupboard through the open window, a tidy sound. I could feel the house behind us, timbers and wires and air resting in its own frame. When the night finally tipped past blue into real dark, we went in and locked the door. I set the spare key back in the drawer where the batteries and twine live. The grinder sat quiet on the counter, ready for the morning. Before bed, I walked the hall and straightened a picture with the side of my hand. The glass held my reflection the way glass does, honest, a little kind. I turned off the last lamp and the room gave itself to the dark without argument. The porch light kept its post steady as breath. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.